April 20th and 21st, there'll be more information coming. We will not be meeting here. We'll be having the Faith Law of Life Conference. Information coming about that in the future. Keep an eye on the website. We're going to be sprucing that up a bit and putting some links on there so you can register and all that good stuff. So without any further ado, Mr. Joel. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks to your support many of our members, we are going to be hopefully really transforming our website. Kind of like a blog spot now. We're pretty soon going to have a real website, and we're thrilled with the support we've had for the website. It's served us well, and we're just going to take it up to the next level. So we're really excited about that. And thank you for your support of our website. Before I get started tonight, I'd like to give an opportunity, just briefly, I believe it's for a minute or two. My friend Larry wants to share a testimony. And Larry, if you just come up and just talk with us here for just a minute, we'd like to hear from you. You can do it from there, that's fine, Larry. Don't forget, Larry is a pastor, so we're taking our lives in our hands here. I give him a minute or two.
For quite a few years now, I have been much concerned about why there are not more people coming to know Christ today. Many pastors preach their heart out Sunday after Sunday, and oftentimes see very little results. And I've been asking the Lord about this. What is wrong? There should be people coming to Christ, especially in this day with the economic situation the way it is. Jobs are just, really down. And people have a tendency, like after 9/11, to stop and look around and say, how did I get here? And oftentimes they end up realizing that they need to turn to God. They remember going to Sunday school. They remember going to church. And things used to be different. Maybe I can get back to that. And so they turn to God and they ask forgiveness and so on. And this question has really been bothering me for quite a few years now. Last month, sitting here and listening to what Joel has, gave me some answers. And as Joel began to explain some things, like the one point he has, the new Christian ethics, I begin to look at that and I'm saying, that's it. That's one of the reasons. We're looking at things not from a biblical standpoint. We're looking at things from a human standpoint. For example, one of the things that he brought out was, above all things, you have to be nice. Well, that's wrong. I'm sorry, it's wrong. John the Baptist, when he was baptizing in the River Jordan, saw the Sadducees, the Pharisees coming. He turns around and looks at them and says, brood of vipers, what has caused you to come here and make a change in your life? Boy, that was nice, wasn't it? Look at Jesus. When the woman who was caught in adultery was brought into him, Jesus kneels down and starts writing things in the dirt, in the sand. Liar, cheat, thief, all kinds of things. That was nice. That really lifted their spirits. And so this business of, we just have to be nice and think that we're going to draw people to Christ, no. We have to tell them the truth. Because the Spirit of God will take the truth and set conviction upon their hearts. That was one of the things. The other one was that he shared was personal weaknesses. I didn't use a lot of the things, and I developed a sermon out of this. And as I went through the personal weaknesses, I came up with two thoughts. actually one thought with 2 points. And that is, there are two kinds of people within the church, the body of Christ. There are religious people and Christian people. And I was telling Bob on the way down here that when I asked the Lord, what scripture can I use to support this religious people concept, it scared me, because I didn't get the thought out of my mind until the answer was there. Where Paul told Timothy that in the latter days perilous times shall come, for men will be lovers, first of all, of themselves, lovers of money. Go through that whole list. Folks, we're there. We're here. We see it. I see it all the time. This is religious people. We have so many of them in our church. They just come to church because it's a habit. Not to go in to witness or to worship the Lord, to pour out their hearts to God in thankfulness for what He's done. We're not there for that. That's so much. And then, of course, you have the Christian people who want to serve God with their whole heart. And they want to make sure they're living right. They're the kind of people, like Jesus said, blessed are those who do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. This session here, I look forward to it every month. And Bob was explaining to me tonight on the way down the intent of this, what Joel is doing, and Bob. And it's working. What you folks are doing here is working. So keep up the good work. I thank you for it. I'm glad I'm part of this. And I hope that maybe one day we can get something closer to home up in the Lehigh Valley, and maybe have these twice.
How far do you travel to come, Larry?
40, 50 miles.
About an hour.
About an hour? Okay. All right, well, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. Let's come back. Thank you very much. All right, well, going right along with that, our lesson for the night, the morphing of missions, biblical to contemporary. You know what morphing means? Yeah, you take someone's picture and you morph it, you change it into someone else's picture. It just kind of happens slowly right in front of you. You know, there's certain iconic things, icons, almost idols, maybe not really. I was just interested in what Toby was sharing there. It's kind of funny, even in Christian circles, there's certain things that you don't question, and one of them is, oddly enough, public education. You almost don't question that. It's like it's always been here. And if you don't believe in public education, you somehow don't believe in what? In missions, right? Because we're sending out our little missionaries into the public school, and of course they're converting everybody. We know that's working out well. Actually, conversion is happening in public school the wrong way. Well, there's another icon that we have, and I believe it's missions. To start out tonight, I'd like to read a short passage from a book that I have called Saints and Strangers. This book was written back in 1945, and it's the most complete book that I know of that details the journey of the pilgrims from England to Holland to North America. And the thing that drove them in part was the condition of the church in England. Now, we tend to think the church in 1500s, 1600s was really, really strong. Well, one minister had a different view of it. And listen to what this minister had to say about the church then, and we'll apply it to the church of today. This was a pastor, and he preached a message, and he said the church was, mincing no words, this pastor, a huge mass of old and stinking works of conjuring, witchcraft, heard about that tonight, sorcery, charming, blaspheming the holy name of God, swearing and forswearing, profaning the Lord's Sabbath, disobedience to superiors, contempt of inferiors, murder, manslaughter, robberies, adultery, fornication, covenant breaking, false witness bearing, lying. It was filled with arrogant hypocrites and renegades. There was everywhere a crying need for honest and zealous pastors to admonish, correct, suspend, and excommunicate such noisome, hurtful, and monstrous beasts out of the house of God without respect of persons. What a guy. I mean, wouldn't you just want to elect that guy to your church board? Maybe he'd be your next mega church pastor for about a day. Well, the writer goes on to say, in their franker moments, even some of the bishops, these are the Church of England bishops now. He's talking about the Church of England. So even some of the bishops agreed that they always had some excuse to postpone action. Now was not the time for reform, and now never came. Besides, it would be necessary to retain harmless beliefs and ceremonies if the weak and ignorant were not to be lost to the Lord. That means, we have to keep some of these things that are meaningless and actually defective, but the weak and ignorant people like our ceremonies, and they like the way we do it, and we don't want to lose them to the Lord, so let's not clean up our act. Why, it'll throw off the weak and ignorant people. Unfortunately, that's about all they were left with by this time. And there could be no question, of course, of touching the revenues of the higher clergy. Whatever we do, don't touch the money. When they that serve God's altar shall be exposed to poverty, proud Archbishop Whitgift in an aspersion of the early church of Christ himself, then religion shall be exposed to scorn and become contemptible. In other words, if we bishops aren't well off, then people will talk bad about the religion of Christ, and we can't have that. So keep the money coming. All in all, critics made little impression upon the anti-Christian prelates, who more and more insistently demanded that all strictly conform and hold their tongues. Under increasing pressure, many of the Puritans, especially those who were more comfortably situated in life, began to give way and resign themselves to at least a nominal conformity to the Church of England, fearing to jeopardize their personal safety, their bread and butter, and even their creature comforts. Those of greater faith and courage were determined to go on. If there was no place for them in the church, they would withdraw and establish one of their own in which they might worship as they pleased. Come what might, they would defy the bishops, even the Queen. Question for you. You look around and see any kind of zeal like that today too much? See, we tend to think that these people that came before us, they didn't have these problems. Why, everybody in the church back in the 1500s, they must have been pure as a driven snow. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been in church at all. But they had the same kind of problems then. And as the author says, the upstanding bishops agreed, but now's not the time. Now's not the time. Don't bring it up now. Don't argue that point now. But then now just never seemed to come. Well, missions. It's almost, I almost feel a little bit bad questioning missions, right? It's almost like you're not a Christian. You don't question missions, you question everything else, but not missions. Well, tonight we are going to take a look at how we've gotten to where we are. A short study that asks the question, are modern mission strategies and tactics biblical? It's not like we don't have a record in the Bible, right? It's not like we don't have missionaries in the Bible, right? We do. Shouldn't be too hard. The purpose of this brief study is threefold: to raise long and overdue questions about how we do missions. By the way, what is a missionary? What does a missionary do? If all a missionary is someone who goes and builds outhouses for whatever, buildings in a foreign country, then I guess all kinds of people who don't even know Christ are missionaries, right? If that's really all it is building buildings someplace else, we have a lot more missionaries than we thought we had. Some of them are paid by the government. We don't even have to raise money for them. So what is a missionary? Paul was clearly a missionary. Not really familiar with how many buildings he built. We'll get back to that later. To ask if the way we evaluate missions is relevant, or even if we evaluate missions at all. Would you know how to get a job for life? Become a missionary. All you really need is a camera. Okay, I'm being a little, okay, well, that's a little, that probably wasn't fair. But really, if you can tell some good stories, do a good slide presentation, and just keep raising the money when your supporters quit or you get new ones or whatever, you got a job for life in missions. Yeah, you can. You absolutely can. How do we evaluate? Are we not interested in evaluating? And third, you know what? I don't know. Can we raise that a little bit, Jim? Thanks. To help you think about what it would take to get at least some missionaries, and you can't read that there, to at least get some missionaries off the field. I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to ask for a raise of hands right now. How many of you have ever heard a missionary say that there are some missionaries that shouldn't be on the field? Have you ever heard that? I'm going to raise my hand. I've heard that more than once. Yeah, a few of you have. Let's stop and think about that for a minute. Here's people on the field saying there's some missionaries that shouldn't be there. Now, don't you think that should be a moment when you just sit up and take notice and say, you know what? We really ought to look into this. I had one missionary tell me flat out. He said, there are missionaries on the field, I know them. He said, who are running away from the States. They can't deal with the fact of the States. They're missionaries. That's why they're there. It'd be a good idea to get some off the field, but we'll never get them off the field if we can't evaluate anything. You know, our missions philosophy pretty much is this. The more missionaries, the better, no matter how bad they are. Just the more the merrier. Send them out. And one more philosophical point. Here in America, we have no problem questioning TV evangelists who pervert the gospel. So why is it considered nearly heretical to question foreign evangelists? I hope you have no problem at all questioning the televangelists with their prosperity gospel nonsense, who, by the way, prey mostly upon poor people. That's their targets for the most part. That's where they raise their money for the most part. I saw a number this week. I could hardly believe the number, but the number I saw, this particular person come with a number of $90 billion in televangelist fraud per year worldwide. We have no problem questioning that. Why is it then that we have a problem when we question foreign missions? I'm glad we don't apply the same status, if you will, of foreign missions as we do to evangelists, because if we did with that with our evangelists, here we go, all we sit around saying, well, I guess he's reading from the Bible, right? He's on TV and he's reading from the Bible. That's pretty much all we need to worry about. That's good. Don't question it. What's the problem here? We can't question it. Missions. Missionaries today tend to work, listen to this, tend to work independently or through organizations not affiliated with churches that traditionally ran missionary agencies in the past. And their work may be focused on providing humanitarian aid rather than founding churches and winning converts. This is from Joe Carter, writing in the Gospel Coalition, an internet website. Wait a second. Rather than founding churches and winning converts. Do we have missionaries out there doing that today? I don't even know if we know. Honestly, right now, whatever church you go to, do you have the, unless you know the missionaries personally, do you have the faintest clue what they're doing out there? Honestly now. I'd be shocked if you do. Shocked. Missions. Good for fundraising, right? Take some National Geographic type pictures of natives. Have some good stories. Good fundraising stuff. And it's good for feeling. I think three feelings you get out of it. You feel good, like you're really doing something. You feel important. Give that money and make a difference. And you feel relevant. This is really why we're here. Missions. This is now I'm really living. I'm doing the ultimate thing. I'm giving to missions. Now my idea of missions might be kind of foggy. But that doesn't matter. It's missions. That's all I really need to know. It's just missions. Missions is supposed to be good for fulfilling and furthering, first of all, the dominion mandate. Then God said, let us make man in our image according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. Then God blessed them. First thing that God said to his new creation, new creature, made in his image. First thing he says, be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over every living thing that moves upon the earth. Question. Have you recently thought or heard a sermon on the idea of missions being a fulfillment of the dominion mandate? Maybe you have. But that's the first thing that we're told right in Genesis why God created people. He wanted them to have dominion over his creation. And why is that? God is a creator. He loves to create. And he loves it when his favorite creation, which is people, this we know, has dominion over his original creation. He loves that. That's why we're here. And when we do missions, we spread that dominion mandate over all the earth. That's what he says, right? Be fruitful, multiply, and fill up this earth. Supposed the Great Commission, which I believe is a further explanation of the dominion mandate. Go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, Holy Spirit, throughout the earth, filling up the earth. And the greatest commandments, filling and furthering the greatest commandments, which are, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, love your neighbor as yourself. That's what it's supposed to be. Do you believe that? That even in missions it's possible to do more harm than good? Or is it, no, they're missionaries. They got to be doing good. They're missionaries after all. It's all good. How about good things can come out of bad goals and operations? Yeah, we know that. You do a bad job as a missionary and still have good things happen. Don't raise your hand. How many of you ever been in a church like that? Don't raise your hand. Bad things are going on, but good things happen still as a result. So we can't say that, well, this guy's on the mission field, and yeah, he's a bad missionary, yeah, he's not doing it, yeah, he doesn't do anything, but hey, souls are still getting saved. Well, that can happen. But it doesn't mean that he should be in the field at all. There is absolutely nothing wrong with raising questions about modern missions. There is nothing wrong with that. Personally, I'm convinced that missions have become like what Eric von Kuhnelt said years ago. People talk about what they don't have or what they're not doing right. Thus, people who are duplicitous talk about loyalty. People in bad health talk about health all the time. Oftentimes people with little money are the ones talking about money all the time. I just wonder, in the church, we talk missions all the time. It might be what we're doing worse than anything else. Anybody recognize these gentlemen? Ruthann, you don't count. Mercy, well, if Ruthann doesn't count, you don't count. Anybody recognize him?
Jim Elliott, Saint.
Yeah, Jim Elliott. There's Jim Elliott right there. There's Nate Saint. Happens to have been my uncle. This young man here was one of the killers. He died himself a very horrible death. This young man here named Roger Darian and Peter Fleming and Ed McCauley. They all died in 1956 and was well known throughout the evangelical world. But a funny thing happened on the way to establishing a church after these men died. I want you to listen if you would. This book was written by my cousin Steve, who went back to Ecuador in the late 90s. He went back there to see how the church that was established back when his father had been killed, back when he was like 2 or 3 years old. See what kind of progress had been made during those years. So he starts out with an account of what happened back then, and then he brings it up to date. He says this. He says, when the Wadani, as those are the Indians, asked my family me to come live with them and my Aunt Rachel's, after my Aunt Rachel's death in '94. Now think of this. This happened in 1956. So when they went to live in '94, it's 38 years, right? Almost 40 years, a generation. So it's going back. How's it working? After my Aunt Rachel's death in '94, I was dismayed to find the Wadani Church was less functional than it had been when I lived with them during school vacations while growing up. Did you hear that? Less functional than it had been when he was less than a teenager. When I was a teenager, Wadani had built their own churches. Now they let a church built for them by foreigners fall into disrepair, telling me they didn't know who it belonged to, and so didn't have permission to fix it. When I was a teenager, the elders of the Wadani church baptized me. Now the church had no identified elders. And they waited for outsiders to baptize their own people. I began to see what being net receivers had done to the proud people I once known as net givers. The Wadani were feeling threatened by outsiders who were dominating more and more of their lives. They had grown increasingly dependent on outside medicines, trade goods, airplanes, schools, radio communications, and money. I was not surprised that the tribe felt threatened by oil companies, environmental groups, and the government. It was a major surprise to me, however, to find that they also felt threatened by all of the benevolence they were receiving from Christian missions and relief organizations. How could the efforts of believers have had such a different effect than they intended? Could help cause harm? For nearly half a century, the Wadani had received the full benefit of 20th century mission strategy. Millions of Christians knew about them. Many more than the typical number of Christians had gone to them, and much more money than usual had been spent on them. If current missions methods are effective, the Wadani should have been our star success story. Instead, after decades of missionary effort, while there was a group of individual Wadani believers, there was really no functioning Wadani church. How could that be? And furthermore, why is no one even asking how that could be? I talked to Steve after he'd written this. You know what he told me? After he'd written some things, those things and others in the book, which are kind of pointed and kind of accusatory. You know what his reward was? A lot of missionaries refused to talk to him. That was pretty much that. I mean, no interaction really. Just not going to talk to him anymore. Right? Really, honestly, now think about it. If you were interested in building the Church of Jesus Christ, wouldn't you be crying crocodile tears over a sad failure such as this? Maybe not. I mean, you talk about an incident that raised money, right? You get a lot out of this story. A lot of people did. Strengthen your mission board. Yeah, a lot of good things could happen. Well, let's talk about this situation because I think it's a microcosm of what we're dealing with. What was not done? Wadani of Ecuador. What was not done? What was done? 5 questions. What should have been done? Based on what? What will it take to do it right after all? These are the 5 questions we'd like to deal with tonight. First of all, what was not done? No church was established, so therefore no daughter churches were established either. The church planting ended before it began.